Welcome everybody. It's good to have you all here. This is your Nature Journal workshop. So what I wanted to do with all of you folks today is to take a look at shiny bugs revisited. You see, during the Wild Wonder Conference, I taught this class on how to draw shiny bugs. For those of you who know me, I am easily distracted by anything, squirrel, right? Anything going on around me. And right when I started it, somebody put on this, we had a note that people were really wondering about what kind of hats to wear. And I went on a tangent about hats at the start of my beetle drawing workshop. And the result was that at the end of the workshop, I said, and that's how you draw shiny bugs. And I was thinking like, but there's still a couple other things I want to show. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to show you. So even if you weren't there at the Wild Wonder workshop, you get this little bonus package of some shiny bug drawing. And I hope to not get distracted and actually kind of get into some of those final techniques. Just to catch you up on where we were. By the way, if you're kind of drawing along at home, if you were at that class, you can pull out your sheet from it and we'll add to that. But if not, for these exercises, you can pretty much just sort of draw a little blob and we'll kind of just work on textures on top of that. On my piece of paper, I'm going to be working on top of a drawing of a beetle or a bug or another insect that I did. But without worrying about the representation of the insect itself, you can focus on these textures in this class. And that will help you draw textures on these shiny bugs. So I'm going to jump to the worksheet that I did in that class. And it should be here. There it is. So this was what we were working on in that class on drawing shiny bugs. And we got fairly far along on this one. We had a few that were kind of starting to kind of get their shine on. But there were kind of a bunch of details and things that kind of fell onto the cutting room floor. And so what I have, so what I've done here is I have laid down a few coats of watercolor on top of these. So for instance, this little wasp right here, it got a coat of yellow across it. And then I came along and hit in a few of the shadows areas in that with a kind of a warm brown mixture. On this little ladybug up here, it was painted red all across it. And I think I lifted out some of the paint in here, giving more of an intense color in there. There's also a little bit of a shadow that was painted beforehand in there. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to try to sort of unpack a few secrets on sort of making these guys just to have a little bit more fun with how to make them look shiny. Let me see if I can with this camera. No, it doesn't allow me to zoom down there, but that's okay. I'm going to be drawing on top of these sketches and drawings here. And as I do, be sort of showing you how I would be applying paint, applying pencils in ways that will kind of give me the effects that I'm looking for here. Let me start just with this little bug here. What I've done in advance is I have painted this first a shadow area, the shadow areas in it, and then I painted that over with green. I now want this to, I'm going to do two things. I'm going to, if you look at it, the thing is kind of dull right now. There's no real highlights or reflections on it. If I want this to be a little bit shiny, a little bit glossy, I'm going to show you what I would do. If I want this to be very, very glossy, I'm going to show you how I would further modify it beyond that. So let's just start with a little bit of gloss and a little bit of texture. To get started with texture, what I'm going to do is I'm going to take a white Prismacolor pencil here. This one is kind of worn down. And I am going to, on this paint that's dry, I am going to just come in and hit a few kind of highlight areas that I want to make it look like are catching sunlight. If you've already put your color down, you can think of this as sort of your sunlight pencil. And with my sunlight pencil here, if there is some, let's say there's a little lip, a little ridge around the top edge of this bug here, if I hit that with a little bit of the white colored pencil, it gets a little bit of shine that pops up there. Now let's say there's another little kind of ridge along the back edge of this. A few places I'm going to hit that, and then you sort of feel like there's a surface that is kind of popping up and it is catching a little bit of light. Same with if my light's coming in from this side of the drawing, this side of the critter's head here might get a little bit of light on it. And if light is coming in from this side here, then I'm going to put into this area just a little bit of texture. So I'm making a few kind of spots in here. That these would be places where there's a little bit of a few little bumps on the surface that are picking up light. And now I'm going to do the same right here on the side of this structure. And you see how that, just sort of having the gloss on one side makes it feel, well, feel just a little bit more reflective. I can do the same right down into here. Sometimes there you can see kind of hints of some veins in these surfaces. And I'm also just going to have a little bit of texturing in there. If I put stuff into this back wing, I'm going to put a little bit here, but not so much along this side because I want this side to feel like it's dropped into shadow. If I want this to feel even brighter, what I do is I increase the contrast and the strength of the white reflection. So I have a little kit here that has gouache paint in it. And I'll be doing a little workshop on kind of painting with gouache in a bit, but gouache is like watercolor, but it's much more opaque. And these cakes are dry. I'm going to just drop into this first one. And with the tip of my water brush that doesn't have too much water on it, I'm going to just drop it into the white here and just spin it a little bit. And what I'm doing is I'm liquefying some of this and turning that into a little bit of a paste. If it's too watery, my gouache will go on looking good, but then will quickly reveal that it's transparent as it dries. Now I'm going to come in here and I'm going to just dance the tip of my brush in here. And if you can see that this is just a little bit stronger. And it gives me just a few of those highlights that pop just a little bit more. If it's a smoother surface that doesn't really have texture on it, then what I would do is I would give it kind of a highlight ball. And so that just sort of feels like it just sort of got a little bit more glossy. So again, you can play with these approaches on any kind of a subject. And if you're just doing this at home, don't worry about having to put it on top of something that looks like an insect. You can play with this just on a just on a little oval that you've made, and you want to play with some textures on. This is a white gel pen, and I can also use that for putting white on top of dark things. And unless this white gel pen has run out of white ink, I'll be able to show you something cool. But something that you'll find that's really, really frustrating with your white gel pens is they have a very short shelf life. Once you start using them, they dry up crazy fast. And you're like, where did my white gel pen go? I don't like this tool. And then you get a new one. You go like, oh, I love this tool. And then it'll start to dry up on you way too fast. And you're like, I don't like this tool anymore. And you get a new one. But when they work, come on, work. There you go. I can draw in some crisp little highlights on top of these legs or other details. So that's making this little insect just a little bit more glossy. And depending on how the lights are set up, lights can dance around and make all sorts of different interesting patterns. So, you know, it can be also gonna liquefy my white again. So some white on the tip of this brush. So, you know, here I sort of change the shape of that a little bit. You know, depending anywhere that there's a kind of a little bump, you'll have one of these little reflections showing up. The best thing to do is, if you have a real reflective object in front of you, is to look at it and squint. And when you squint, you'll be able to see where those highlights are a little bit more easily. Last thing I'm going to do before I go is I'm going to put in a tiny bit of a reflected light on this. So the idea of reflected light is that if light is coming from this side, some of it hits the object directly, but some goes past here and hits whatever's on the other side. Let's say it hits this beetle. Some of that light bounces off and ends up giving you a little bit of illumination on the side that is in the shadow there. So notice, I'm going to take this little white gouache on here, and I'm just going to make a rather subtle little reflected area out here. If that's too bright, I'm going to tap it with my finger before it dries and kind of lighten it. And that often just sort of gives you a little bit of a feeling. I'm going to hit that with a little bit of water, soften it a bit more. There we go. Just a little bit of a suggestion that there's some light that comes up on this side, but it's nothing as bright or intense. Kind of just rounds out your object. So you've got your direct light on one side, just a little hint of reflected light bouncing back on the other side. You see the same sort of thing was going on with this beetle here, that I had a highlight in here, and then this little scoop of white in here is just some white gouache on there. This was on top of the red paint when it was dry. I put a highlight over here with my gouache, and then a highlight, a reflected light piece in there. Sometimes I will also add color into that reflected light. If there's an object over here that is reflecting light and it is purple, it'll reflect back a little bit of purple into this. If it's green, it will reflect back some green. I will often use a little bit of blue color in my reflected light. And that sort of, that could be something reflecting some sky back into the object. And so to do that, I'm just going to take, I've got a pencil here that has a little bit of blue, light blue lead in it. So if I make some squiggles off on the side here, ooh, that is going to be too dark. I'm going to use my non-photo blue pencil and do that. I'm going to take my non-photo blue pencil and just kind of come along in here and put just sort of a little ghosting of pale blue. Sometimes that does a good job of suggesting that light. This little ladybug has no spots. Well, it also is missing I painted in one of the little side spots on it, so I'm going to correct that now. But I'm going to add some spots and markings onto this. So I painted in this little spot here that should be white, so now I'm coming in with just some white gouache. And putting that in, I'm going to let it dry. And then I'm going to, I will be able to add even more on top of it. So I can put a few layers of white gouache right there into that spot. I'm also going to put black spots onto our ladybug here. And so in order to put those black spots on, I'm going to have those black spots underneath this highlight. So what I'm going to first do is I'm going to erase my highlight here. I'm going to just take some wet brush. And because that highlight was put in with gouache, when I wet gouache, it reactivates and can move around. Like, so if I wanted to get rid of this little highlight in here, I could come in here and start to lift out with a damp brush part or all of that highlight. So I just did that right in here. Once more, I'm going to just throw a little bit of, no, I don't think I'll put more bright red in there. And we'll keep those colors. But notice how I was able just to say goodbye to that little highlight. Now, I'm going to put in some spots. So I'm going to take watercolor here. This is just straight up watercolor, and I'm going to use some of my black. This is neutral tint. Neutral tint is essentially black. And I wiggle my brush around and I put it on here, wiggle my brush around, come on here. I'm now going to test the texture and consistency of that paint on a little spot there. I get a nice little blob of black. And this one, I am going to paint a black spot in here on this side of the wing covers. And of course, it has to have its buddy parallel black spot over here on the other side. So they meet there and go across that whole spot. So there's my first set of spots. There is a spot that's going to be down here on the side. There's going to be another spot that is on the side in here, but it is on this sort of surface that is pointing out this way. If you look straight at it, it would be circular, but from this angle, it's going to show up as more of a oval. So by drawing that one in as an oval, it suggests that there's a surface that's rounding down there. There is a spot that's going to be out in here. And I then need that other spot kind of on the other side here. So it's going to be starting to kind of go down here. I want to think about kind of lining these up like this. If I draw a parallel line across here, it's going to go across the back of these spots. It's going to go through these. Oops, I'm running off the page there. This one is here. It might have a hint of a little buddy spot. Maybe I might see some of that in there. But as a little line. Now what I'm going to do is let all this dry. And once it's dry, I'm going to put highlight and texture on top of that. So a general rule is I'm going to first put my colors down, and then I'm going to put my texture. A good example of that is going to be, as well, that's drawing. I'm going to do the same thing. I'm going to add some black areas into my friend, the wasp here. So this wasp has a black eye. And if your paint is not too watery, what you're going to be able to do is essentially draw with the tip of your brush. And that allows you to really make some fine little details. This wasp has a little black section in the side of its body. Let me draw that all in black. And that then goes up and covers most of the body except a little yellow spot there. So here I'm just drawing on top of this, not worrying about texture. And because I'm putting on a darker color, I can easily put darker watercolor on top of lighter watercolor. And if I'd done the black first and then tried to put yellow around it, the yellow might sort of smear into that black. I can't paint yellow over this black. That's why a lot of watercolor people will always start with lighter value things first and slowly work their way into darker. A few little black spots on some of those segments. And then I'm going to get more black on the tip of my brush. Nice, solid black. So here again, I'm just painting dark details on top of lighter watercolor. And now again, I'm going to let this dry. And while that's drying, I'm going to just hit the bottom of this, a little bit more dense black. There we go. While that's drying, I'm going to, on my little friend, the damselfly, put in a few little black spots. So up here in its thorax, it has a little black marking, a little bit on the back of its neck. Nevaeh, this damselfly is for you. Here at where these segments connect to each other, this has a little bit of, so just, I'm popping in to some really rich dark. That would be a place where close focus binoculars would really be your friends. right? This guy's still wet. This guy's drying. This guy's mostly dry now. But while it's just drying a little bit more, I'm going to do one other thing in, this was the iridescent beetle that we drew. And I want to show you a fun thing that you can do is in the black parts of the iridescence, if there are, let's say this beetle has texture over it, there are tiny little pinprick holes in it. Those pinprick holes in the places where it's the reflections or the shine is really going to black, I will often be able to see a few little, are these showing up on the, a little bit. I can see in these black areas, places where there are sort of changes in the texture. If there's a hole, I might see those as a pale spot in the middle of the dark. And similarly, in the dark part, I mean, in the lighter blue part, if there are little pinprick holes there, I can see those as little dark spots in the middle of the the white there. So what I'm going to do is get out there we go, just a black pencil. And into some of these areas, I am going to put in just a few little black spots into that highlight area. So I've got some light spots in the dark. I've got some dark spots in the light. And that just suggests that, like, ooh, there's another layer of texture on that. One more thing I'm going to do while this is all drying is I'm going to add, I think that this dark area in this beetle is just looking a little bit too solid. So I'm going to just introduce into that with a blue pencil, a little bit of reflected light. And so if there are these ridges, I'm going to just put some little ridges in with this blue pencil of reflected light. Oh, that's nice. See what I did there? I'm going to erase that and do it again, because I want you to sort of see this before and after. Similarly, in this area here, look at how that kind of just sort of a big flat dead zone. I'm going to just put a little bit of reflected light into there. Just gives that little bit of a shine. Let me erase these lines in here and we'll just redo this. I'm not erasing it because I didn't like it. I'm erasing it because I liked it. I just wanted to make sure that everybody sort of saw this before and after. So here's before, sort of a big zone. I mean, not, I want this to feel it's black paint and it's dry. So I can now come across the top of that with a light colored pencil. And I'm going to just pick up the hint of a few of these ridges. And maybe kind of here, just a little dot. Yeah. So I'm just kind of coming in here and tweaking some of the shadow effects that I had created before. Now, I'm going to jump back up here to my friend, the ladybug. And for this, I'm going to want a sharp pencil. So I'm going to sharpen my white pencil. I like to have a pencil sharpener that holds my shavings, so I'm not leaving little piles of shavings behind me in the field. So I've sharpened this up. Now, I don't know if you've ever had this problem um, with colored pencils before, but if I start to draw with this right now, this beautiful sharp tip is going to snip off, right? And so what you start to draw and the tip of it breaks. So what we'll often do is just spin the tip of the pencil lightly on the paper. And it doesn't completely remove that problem, but it makes it a lot, it's not going to happen as much or as prominently. The moment I start to draw, that the tip of this is just going to snap, 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 break on. I'm not dulling it. I'm kind of sharpening the point against the paper. So now any kind of major irregularity will be kind of worked out of the tip. And I hope as I start to draw on this thing again, that I am going to, I'm going to be able to keep my point. What I'm going to do now is I'm going to draw any little surfaces, like along this little edge here. That edge that is pointing towards me, that might catch a little bit of light. And what else can I do with this? Well, let's see here. So there's a little bit of that edge. I am going to, let's say there's a few kind of little ridges. I'm going to lightly just kind of come down here. And notice how my pencil strokes are changing their angle as I kind of come out here. These lines, in my head, I'm wrapping around this round surface. The line that I'm making is it's kind of staccato. My line sometimes, pops up a little bit more, and other places it fades. What else could be going on? Well, there can be, maybe let's sort of strengthen this highlight that's in this area. I'm going to, with the tip of this pencil, add some light here into the top of this. And so as that light spills over those spots, it's clear that the lights is on top of that spot. I don't have the highlight over the spot. The spot over the highlight. I have the highlight over the spot. Now let's put some into this reflected light zone. Or I can also use the blue in there. And perhaps the non-photo blue. I'm going to take into this sort of dead black zone, nothing really interesting happening over here. I think I'm going to actually just use my white in there. I'm going to put a few dots. The front edge of this thorax here, I'm going to hit with a little bit of light because that would be catching light. And then I'm going to have a highlight on the head here. If I want my little friend, the beetle, to have an even brighter highlight, so it is a shinier little beetle, make it shinier. Oops, whoa, look what I just did. I had all this dark on the top of that, I just put it in my white. So I always tell people not to accidentally do with your yellow. I guess your white gouache would be another place where you don't want to take a big dirty brush and dab it in there. So I'm going to try to do just a little bit of palette first aid here. Pick up some of that so I don't get mucky palette. Try to keep this, there we go, white. So I'm getting a fairly dry brush. Whoops, wipe on here, not a lot of water on my brush. So when I come down into this cake, I'm getting kind of a thick mixture of gouache. And then when I can come in here, that is just making this, you see how that, now we have this more kind of opaque, bright spot on there. So I like the gouache in combination with the gouache in combination with the that colored pencil. On some of its little beetly legs, I might use my gel pen just to sort of say there's a little bit of a highlight here and a little bit of a highlight here. That's too bright. I tap it with my finger. Now this character is dry. And so I'm going to shine it up. Actually, first notice these wings here. Those wings are, that's just watercolor, sort of a golden color, a little bit of brown down in the base, sort of with a kind of smooth wash between them. When that's dry, I can draw over it. Here, there, I want black, I think I want a dark brown. So I've got a little set of colored pencils that I regularly bring with me. Hey, dark umber, that'll work. And I'm going to get it sharpened. And I will draw into sort of a suggestion of these veins that are coming in here. And as your pencil kind of stroke goes out there, it just gets lighter. It's just a kind of little indication of it. Now, on my little dragonfly friend, I'm going to add a few highlights. If the highlight crosses over that base color, as well as the highlight, as well as that little dark pattern, then it's kind of clear that the highlight is above both of those. Let's give this little wasp also a bit of highlight. So I'm lightly just kind of, my pencil is kind of going in small circles. Small circles are a good way if I don't want like lines or patterns. You can do this with graphite pencil. You can do this with colored pencil. When you don't want kind of a pattern to show up from, oh, I'm kind of drawing in this direction, right? I kind of just roll with little small circles. Right, so little small circles. And that allows you to put in texture, or I mean color, without look at that. I think myself, okay, I want a few more kind of crisp edges, maybe here's the edges of these sections. Any part that sticks up that I think might catch light. And the harder I press, the more kind of crisp that shadow, the more kind of glossy this becomes. And put a little shadow, I mean, not a shadow, but a little highlight right into there, that part of the leg. And if those aren't bright enough, I can reinforce that with my gel pen. Gel pen is starting to dry out. Someone ever invents a gel pen that doesn't dry out like lightning, we will trumpet your names from the name from the mountaintops in the Nature Journal Club. You will be our new best friend. In the meantime, we're just sort of making do with what we got. So, and then up in here into this highlight, I'm going to just add a few little dots, kind of stippling in more of a highlight in there, stippling in more of a highlight in here. There'll be some parts of the wing that reflect light. Those aren't showing up well enough. So then it says to me, I have to switch to gouache. I'm getting some white gouache on the tip of my brush, kind of thickly. And I then am, with my brush, I'm kind of, there's almost a kind of a tremor in my hand. I try to intentionally induce a tremor into my hand so that as I make this line, it's sort of suggesting, you know how the insect wing, those are the parts that pop up and others are kind of down, so that it's on those sort of more pop-up parts that it's going to be reflecting more light, that kind of introduce just a little bit of irregularity into that mark. Let's get more of a highlight here. On this damselfly wing, there are there's often kind of an iridescent sheen in a damselfly wing. And here I just suggested the transparency of it by having kind of a gray tone in back so that white gel pen, so all those kind of highlights you see there are just white gel pen dropped on top of that wing. But if there's an iridescence in the wing too, sometimes a good way of suggesting that is just by kind of a little hint of, here I've got a little bit of light green paint. And I'm going to put a little bit of a hint of some light green into that wing. And I'm going to put that immediately next to, these are colors that just in iridescence will often kind of shimmer next to each other, a little bit of pink. And so I just have a few little kind of bars of those things next to each other. And that just kind of, you know, suggests that there may be some other colors kind of reflecting back in there. Dragonfly and damselfly eyes are really, really weird. There will be, as you look around on the surface, you'll see these sort of weird dot patterns that will change their shape depending on how you're holding the insect or how you are kind of moving around the insect. Just put a little bit of dark into that upper eye there. One last thing that I'm going to do here is a trick that I learned from Ann Caudle, who is one of the instructors at the UC, or not UC, it's now Cal State Monterey Bay Science Illustration Program. What she will often do at the end of a drawing is she will just kind of come in and she says, I want you just to kind of come in there and crisp up the edges. And I want to kind of show you what she means. She'll take a very, very sharp pencil, or sometimes a fine pen, and just in some places around the edges, just kind of clean up those edges by making a fine sort of deliberate line. And so on parts of this critter's legs, like here, it's a little bit indistinct and blurry. I'm just going to kind of get Ann Caudle on this. And this is a sharp pencil. This is a 0.3 millimeter mechanical pencil. So it's got a fairly sharp lead. And I am just going to come in here on this edge. And, oops, it helps with a mechanical pencil if you actually have lead that is sticking out. Or I should say graphite, because it's not lead. I wish I could kind of zoom on this a little bit, but I'm just kind of coming around the edges of this leg here and making those edges just a little bit more deliberate. And the damselflies have these cool bristles that point in on their leg there. So I'm going to give that one just, oh, you can't really see that on the screen. Now, very often when I'm drawing a picture, I can kind of hear Ann Caudle in my head just saying like, I would, just kind of come in there and just crisp up some of those edges. It's a really good program. Cal State Monterey Bay Scientific Illustration. Jenny Keller and Ann Caudle are two just wonderful teachers. They also will sometimes teach summer courses that you don't have to be part of that program to take, and I'll bet they're doing some online things. Just on those legs, I came in there, crisped it up. Let's see if I bring this to you. No, wrong way. Nope. Nope, almost got it. Try this. This is one of these kind of like pat your head. There we go. So just kind of crisped up some of those edges in there. Now, look at that tummy. Look at sort of the tummy there. I'm going to kind of crisp up here around the tummy, and you're going to see when I kind of hold it back up there, it's just a little bit easier to read. It's just taking a technical term, the tummy. We just kind of tightened that up just a little bit. And I put a few highlights on that leg, probably. Take a look at it one more time. Where are we? There we go. And if you think you kind of overdid it with your gel pen, nice thing, which I think I did there, really nice thing about the gel pen is that it's water soluble. So you can just go back in there and lightly stroke some of those marks, and they become a little bit less in your face. That's better. See that hint of iridescence in the wings. We see those little shadowy marks in there. We've got our other beetle friend here, where you can see in the dark part, in the light part, a few dark spots. And in the dark spot parts, you can see a few light spots. Here is our wasp flying along. Look at how much it's about to benefit from just, I'm about to hit it with a little bit of reflected light. And I'm going to call it a day on that. But so here it is without that reflected light. I'm going to just get a little bit of blue pencil and throw it into the bottom there. So this is a little bit of blue pencil, reflected light. Maybe in this yellow part, I'll even use. Let's bring that back, and I think that helped it. And then over to our friend, the beetle here. We've got those spots, and notice that the reflections are on top of those spots. So I pulled out that highlight, put in my spots, put the highlight back in. And our little friend, the bug here, we've got those glossy spots on it. The sharper the glossy spots, the brighter white the glossy spots, the more it will feel shiny. If they're just subtle, it will feel more dull. So those are all kind of extensions of the shiny beetle drawing workshop that I taught in Wild Wonder. And I hope that there are some useful kind of nuggets and ideas that you saw here that you can incorporate into textures that you're working on. And thank you so much for joining us today for the Ask Jack workshop, where you didn't even have to ask. Let me jump back here. Hi, it's me again. So again, when we're drawing out with our nature journals, don't get wrapped around the axle like I got to get the texture too, right? If this sort of stuff is fun for you, great. It just kind of fills kind of more things in your toolkit to help you show what you are observing. Don't make your goal to make pretty pictures. Make your goal to make lots of pictures. And then what happens is the more you just do that, the more you get comfortable with your materials. Like, you know, the idea that like I would pick up this blue pencil, it's like my reflected light pencil. You get more comfortable with your tools, and you also are just reinforcing the neural connections between what comes in through your eye and then how you're going to make those lines on the paper. This is just practice is such an important part of this. And but what we tend to do is just we'll do something and then judge ourselves, right? And say that doesn't look pretty, I can't do this. It's especially difficult on the first page of a new journal. That's where you're going to be the most judgmental with yourself. So what I do very often is I will leave the first page of my journal till later. I won't start on the first page. I jump to page number 2. Those techniques, they're there for you to play with, but just remember, the more you practice with this stuff, put in pencil miles And this skill of looking at something and a representation of it comes out on your piece of paper, it's going to just happen much more fluidly. The best thing is those pencil miles. And again, it doesn't take forever. It happens really fast. And the more we do, the better it goes. Have fun with it. Distract yourself by just falling in love with the phenomenon. And then you won't care about the drawing, and you'll do more drawings.